Hi, I'm Preet Bharara, and I was the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan. But in March of this year, Donald Trump fired me. So what the hell do I do now? Podcast, baby.
Preet Bharara, known as Sheriff of Albany and Watchdog of Wall Street.
So let's get right to my first guest. Brilliant, hilarious, handsome. Please welcome Preet Bharara. It's Bharara. I said Baraha. Bharara. What? It's Bharara. I've always had a problem with that name. Let me ask you this. Is what's going on in the world right now normal? So I think depending on how you feel about institutions in America and what the precedent has been, I think it's not normal. I think we've been deviating from the mean in so many different ways, and I think it's important for the public to know that. I'm sorry? Were you insulted when the president fired you? A little bit. Do you miss subpoena power? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I have a question for you. Why a podcast? I'm doing a podcast because I care about justice, I care about fairness, I care about amplifying my voice. I couldn't get a TV show. I couldn't have said it better myself. And by the way, what's the name of this podcast? Stay tuned. Stay tuned for what? Stay tuned. Stay tuned for what? For the show. Stay tuned. Stay tuned with Preet. So I'm gonna go. Good luck with the show. Good luck with the job hunt, okay? See ya. See you later. From Cafe, welcome to Stay Tuned. I'm Preet Bharara. How are you? I had to wait for the guitar music to come out. It's great to see all 1.2 million of you in the audience. I feel bad for the 45,000 who are still stuck outside. I know it's raining, which is terrible, and I'm sorry that you had to travel through the rain, but you know what that means, the fact that it's raining. It means that Donald Trump ain't here. I'm very impressed. No offense to DC, which was once my home for a period of time, this area. But it's not like you guys are good with precipitation. You're kind of the Donald Trump of cities. Okay. It's just jokes. Thank you for coming. We have a great show. We have a great guest. Chuck Todd is here. We have a great sponsor, Showtime, which is very cool for me, and maybe some of you will appreciate this, especially if you have strict immigrant parents. My brother and I weren't allowed to watch Showtime until we were married, so it's very great that they're a gracious sponsor of the show. I know that there are different modes of transportation. How many of you here came by metro? How many came by taxi? Oh. How many came by some other service like Uber or Lyft? How many came by caravan? We don't have any Middle Easterners in the audience? And how many of you just rode in a blue wave? I know how to pander.
So I think we'll talk with Chuck about this, but it seems that there was a blue wave that took a little longer to appreciate. Last I heard, and my information is a couple of hours old, Democrats won back 35 seats. Could go up as high as 39. Lots of people lost. Dana Rohrabacher lost. Chris Kobach lost. We don't have to go through all of them, but I got limited time, man. The theater's by the hour. But let's give them a round of applause for their service. That's the first round of ironic applause that I've heard in this theater. It's amazing to be in the Lincoln Theater. I've been fortunate enough, having been deprived for some time of my subpoena power, to go from time to time to beautiful theaters around New York City and now here. I've been at the Apollo and the Town Hall, and this is just as beautiful a theater. Many amazing events have happened here, performers in whose footsteps I get to follow. I think if you told Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald there'd be a guy named Preet Bharara with a podcast appearing on the stage, they'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. There are lots of things named after Lincoln, which makes sense, monuments, tunnels, cars, logs. But I must say, given the way, Abe met his demise, I wonder if it seems a bit off to name a theater after him. It's a little bit like, hey, thanks for flying Amelia Earhart Airlines. It's more just jokes. There are lots of people here, friends, family, people I don't know, but who listen to the podcast and support it, which I'm grateful for. I love it when guests of the podcast come to the live show and then wonder, well, how come I'm not a live guest? But we have at least two, and I apologize if there are more. But we have Lisa Monaco and Ben Wittes are here. Two of the smartest people I know, two of the most popular guests we've ever had on the show. I have friends from DC from my time in this area here, so welcome to you guys. My parents, my mom and dad, and my brother, but my mom and dad are seated here somewhere. My mom and dad, applaud for them. In a way, my parents sort of treat my post-U.S. Attorney career like I'm back in Little League. Like we have to go to all the games. There's a lot of drinkers in the back. There's a lot of bars, by the way, in this theater. Have you noticed that? There's upstairs bars. Brett Kavanaugh's like, why didn't I know about this theater? Unless that was him. So my parents come as if it's Little League, and now they're like, oh God, Preet's on the travel team. So now we have to go to Washington, and we have other cities also. There's a lot going on. Just to catch you up a little bit, if you are not a regular, I wrote a book. It's not out yet. It's being edited, but it'll be out. The release date will be known pretty soon. As I aspire to have Paul Giamatti play me in the movie version of the book. But one thing happened, so I look a little different from how I did when we did that trailer about a little over a year ago. And if you understand how sort of tight-knit Indian immigrant families are, you don't want your parents to be surprised when they see you and you look different. So, I'm also a senior legal analyst on CNN, and I took a week by the Jersey Shore to write a couple of chapters of my book and just sort of not do other things and focus on writing. And at the end of that time, I decided, I have this stuff on my face, I might as well keep it. And then I had an appearance on CNN, and my parents, going back to the Little League principle, they also watch all of my appearances on television, and I realized I hadn't told them that I had grown facial hair. And my parents are very sweet and supportive, but I just wanted to let them know. And so here's the text exchange. You should know, but I'm going to show you the actual text exchange. I did not doctor them because, I'm not the White House. You guys really follow current events, don't you? It's a very smart audience. So I say, warning, I'm unshaven. And my very supportive mother replied as follows. My mother said, my son is always look handsome. So if you wonder where I get my self-confidence, it comes from Mom. Thanks, Mom, I love you. Then, you anticipate very well. Then, my dad weighed in. This is real. For those of you who didn't bring your glasses, my dad replied, I could not listen, what are you talking? Just watching your face. What happened? You didn't have time? Or you want to look like that? So, if you want to know where my insecurity came from, that would be from Dad. The good news is, as I think is true, and as many psychologists will tell you, and sort of leadership experts, the path to success is having a good balance between insecurity and self-confidence. So it was a great mix that I had at home. So I love you both. Thank you. I'm overwhelmed and humbled by the success of the podcast. The fact that all of you are here to hear two middle-aged men talk about politics and the law and what have you in the rain, it makes me wonder, are you all letter carriers? Neither rain nor sleet. If you have mail for me, I'll take it in the back. But it's been really overwhelming. And we have millions of downloads. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary of having the podcast. The podcast was a Jeopardy question recently, which is an American milestone. We have these live shows. We have another one coming up. So Mom and Dad are going to have to travel again. We're going to be in LA on November 29th, just in a couple of weeks, with Kumail Nanjiani. We also have something new. If you listen to the podcast, you know that we're announcing something called Cafe Insider, which will include, among other things, a new weekly podcast where Ann Milgram, another frequent guest on the show, and I will break down, oh, look at that, nice picture. Ann, not me. We'll break down the news and some of the things that are going on. I think a lot of things will be going on in the near future. We'll also have a newsletter. We'll also have an opportunity for me to sort of text my reaction to breaking news and a lot of other sort of special contents. Look for that literally in the next few days. The first episode of that new podcast is, by the way, in the Stay Tuned feed, and you can listen to it. So please do that. None of this would be possible without my fine, terrific folks at Cafe and the folks who also helped make this happen at Pineapple Street Media. So tonight's show, I said, has a sponsor, Showtime. And in particular, its documentary series called Enemies: The President, Justice, and the FBI. It's a new 4-part documentary series from Academy Award-winning filmmaker Alex Gibney. He's the man behind Going Clear and so many other things that you've seen. But most importantly, obviously, he was also a guest on Stay Tuned. The series covers the ongoing power struggle between the president and the FBI. For example, who enforces the law when the president is accused of breaking it? Very timely stuff. Enemies, the documentary, moves from Watergate to Iran-Contra to Whitewater, and even touches on the Russian investigation unfolding today under Trump. So it's clear that history has a way of repeating itself, and this series on Showtime examines those connections. And another bonus, I'm actually in it. There again. And you might imagine, I have a lot to say about protecting the integrity of our institutions and my own interesting departure from public service. So it's called Enemies: The President, Justice, and the FBI. It starts streaming this Sunday only on Showtime, but you get to see, exclusively, as my captive audience, a short preview right now.
The FBI doesn't know how far up this goes. It's a matter of national security.
If there is a crime that's been committed by a president, is it the FBI's job to make sure the president's not above the law?
It is possible to get away with wrongdoing. What's to stop any president from doing whatever they want to do?
So you should watch that. Now let's get to your questions. So we had, I think, baskets in the front, and some people with really crappy handwriting put in some questions. I'll do a few quickly, and then we'll get to Chuck. This one comes from Leo, who asks, Preet, when Columbia plays Harvard, who do you root for? Yale. I don't know. I don't really care if they play each other or not. This one comes from Chris in Baltimore. Thanks for coming here from Baltimore, Chris. Hi, Preet. You talk a lot about criminal justice reform. Will you share your thoughts about the merits of the First Step Act making its way through Congress? So you might have read, sort of interestingly, in the last week, after a long period of time where it seems no one can agree on anything, there's no bipartisanship, that there seems to be a little bit of a break in the armor of that tribalism, and an issue that's near and dear to my heart, and to a lot of prosecutors you might not expect, who were tough on crime when it was appropriate, but also think that in some ways we've gone too far, and there are inequities in the system, and we don't take care to make sure that people who go to prison and fulfill their sentence and their obligation are not integrated back into society. If you're a diligent listener to the show, you know that I've talked all the time about the initiative in Florida, which passed by 65% to re-enfranchise felons. And I think it's especially important, not just for people who are at the ACLU and people who are in the criminal defense bar, to stand up for criminal justice reform, but also for people who used to be on the other side. And I consider myself to be one of those people. So the bill that's making its way through, I feel very positive about. I don't know what the ultimate form will take. If I were to prognosticate on what will happen, I think there's a decent chance that Democrats will decide, and there's always some danger in this, but I get it, and maybe it's the right thing to do, the Democrats will decide, well, we shouldn't compromise so much on the things that we want to improve criminal justice, because in a couple of short months, we'll have the majority. And maybe we can get some more concessions on some of the things that we think are important. But in the basic form that I've seen so far, I'm gonna make a couple of comments. There's one provision that seeks to undo what I think is a dramatic unfairness that federal prosecutors were fairly required to pursue, and that is a statute called 18 U.S.C. 924C, which required that if you committed certain kinds of crimes, carrying a firearm or using or displaying a firearm, and you did it successively, then you had a consecutive sentence and depending on the circumstances, it could be 7 years, and the second offense, 25 years, and the third offense, 25 years, all consecutive. So you could have somebody who committed 3 crimes in an evening, robbed 3 bodegas, and you're looking at 75 or 82 years in prison, even if you did it all in an evening. And the intent of Congress seems clear, that the reason you have a higher penalty the second time is because you did the crime the first time, and you got punished for it, and you didn't learn your lesson, and then you went back out and did it again. But that's not how the court interpreted it when it was challenged. In the case, I think the opinion was written by Justice Scalia some years ago. He said prosecutors are able to charge in a way that causes consecutive sentences, even if you did it all in the course of one crime spree, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, and I think was very tough and overly tough, and it looks like that will be remedied in this bill if it passes. The second thing, which is a small point, but one that I've cared about as I started to think in the later years that I was U.S. Attorney, about reintegration of people who have paid their debt to become voters, to become employed, to become part of society again, and stop the cycle of violence, is, the draft that I saw suggests that there's a provision that requires the local jurisdiction or the federal jurisdiction to give every departing inmate, former incarcerated person, an ID. And you might not think that's not a big deal, but if you talk to people who care about these issues, you realize that the most important thing is a simple thing. According to the president, you need an ID to buy cereal, but this is not what I'm talking about. It's important to find employment, it's important to get benefits, it's important to show who you are, and lots of people are being released from incarceration and they had no way to prove who they are, which is odd and ridiculous when you consider that certainly the federal government in the Bureau of Prisons, the BOP, knew exactly who you are and kept very close track, and it's something that I think would cost between $8 or $12 per released inmate, and it's one of those things that's a small investment, it makes a huge difference. It's absurd that we haven't had it so far, and it can make a big difference in people's lives. So I think we should be encouraged. I know that we think there's a lot of ways in which people are deadlocked, but if this goes forward, I think it's a good thing for everybody, and everyone should congratulate both Democrats and Republicans who are supportive. This comes from no name, so I presume it's Julian Assange. This person says, listen to every single episode. For a new set of parents, what does this experienced parent have to offer for advice? Yes, you mean me. I have no idea, but my parents will be available afterwards, and you should ask them. I'm not a parenting expert. I have great kids. I love my kids, and they do very well. The only advice I would give is to make sure that your kids are good. There's a lot of competition in the world, and a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to explain how you get ahead of other people and how you beat other people. Competition is good. I'm one of the most competitive people you've ever met in your life. My parents taught me to both be competitive, but also to treat people well. And I think we have, too many folks who are trying to grab what they think is theirs as opposed to also being generous. So we should spend more time on generosity and less time on taking, and I think that would be better for everybody. Next question. Today's news had the possibility of sending Fethullah Gulen back to Turkey. Is this legal? Won't he be tortured or executed? So that's a complicated question, and I don't know how many folks have the background. So there's a country called Turkey that's headed by a person named Erdogan, who doesn't like me because we prosecuted a person who was close to him. There's a person that he has demonized named Fethullah Gulen, who is an Islamic cleric who used to be close with Erdogan and is now sort of exiled and living in the Poconos in the United States of America. And in various ways, and particularly after the attempted failed coup in Turkey, President Erdogan has blamed a lot of things on this person who's an American resident, Fethullah Gulen, and has for a long time tried to have him rendered back to Turkey. If you follow the news with respect to Michael Flynn, before he became the National Security Advisor. There are stories in the Wall Street Journal about how Michael Flynn was meeting with counterparts in Turkey about bringing Fethullah Gulen back. There's no love lost between the president of Turkey and Fethullah Gulen. And in the last 24 to 36 hours, after the horrible news of Jamal Khashoggi being basically executed, assassinated, and butchered in a Turkish consulate, the reporting is that the American government, led by Donald Trump, is concerned about Turkey putting too much pressure on the Saudis. It's getting very complicated even just talking about it. That they might consider doing Erdogan a favor and bringing back his nemesis to Turkey. And so the question that you ask, is it legal? I don't know how it would be. The reporting I saw suggests that even this president, this administration, care a little bit about the appearance of legality. And so what I've seen in the paper is a request to try to figure out some legal basis, some legal means to bring Fethullah Gulen back for political purposes, which are odd in this circumstance, given that we don't know all the things we should know about the assassination or the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. So I think whatever you think about Turkey, whatever you think about Fethullah Gulen, whatever you think about Jamal Khashoggi, whatever you think about the Saudi folks, whatever you think about realpolitik, whatever you think about international relations, the idea that in a casual way you would decide to render back to a country where I think very likely he would be tortured and possibly killed is not something that America should be proud of or stand for, and I think is a terrible idea. A couple of quick ones left. Preet, do you love Buffalo, New York? From Patrick in Britain, which, we're backstage and we got so many questions, and someone is looking at them and saying, do you want to answer this one? And they thought, why would I answer that question? And I said, I absolutely will answer that question because I love Buffalo, New York. And the reason I love Buffalo, New York, not just because of beef on weck, I love Buffalo, New York because it's the first place in the United States of America that I lived. When my dad and mom emigrated to the United States by way of the United Kingdom, we settled in Buffalo. My mom had never seen snow before, and then she saw a lot of snow. And my earliest memories, or maybe they're fake memories, but the earliest photographs that make it seem like I have a memory of Buffalo are like 8 feet of snow, my mother, who'd never had a winter coat, sort of chasing after me while I'm trying to play in the snow. So we love Buffalo. Thanks for Buffalo coming. Last question, then we got to get to an interview. Preet, what is your son's record for the Rubik's Cube? Very impressive that he has this skill, love the pod. So I checked in with him. His personal best, my youngest, who does the 3x3. In fact, tomorrow morning I'm leaving early to fly back to New York, and I'm driving my son to a 2-day cubing contest. And where would you have a cubing contest, by the way, if you were going to have one of international dimension? You guessed it, Atlantic City, New Jersey. So if you happen to be there this weekend and you see me at the craps table next to a kid with a Rubik's Cube, that might be me. Anyway, his personal best, he can solve a 3x3 in 7.5 seconds. I should have him open for the show. All right, without further ado, he's getting antsy back there, I'm sure. We have an amazing guest tonight, and I think particularly appropriate given how much people are talking about politics and government and Congress and the president. He's covered every major thing you can imagine in American politics over the last, 400 years. He is most famously, as you know, the host of NBC's Meet the Press. He's also the host, because that wasn't enough for him, he's the host of Meet the Press Daily, MTP Daily on MSNBC. He's a political director for NBC News. He's a former NBC chief White House correspondent. He's an Emmy Award-winning reporter. He's won the First Amendment Service Award. He's an author. He knows so much about so many things. We'll probably take this show, 9 or 10 hours. Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Todd.
I have to say, This is like, you're a rock star, man. I mean, you've got a sold-out auditorium. You've got handlers. He's got groupies in the back. This is, man, Trump has created quite the universe for us, hasn't he?
Hi, Chuck.
Hi, Preet.
It's not like you don't travel light. You got a little posse back there.
I know, but it's more fun to like put it on other people.
Thanks for wearing the tie.
Oh, what you're saying is I was not supposed to?
No, it's fine. I feel underdressed.
But your buttons are nicer than mine.
They're bright buttons.
They're bright purple.
They're
yeah.
bright purple buttons. So why don't we start with this? Blue Wave?
Elise Jordan, who is on MSNBC as a regular analyst, I'm going to give her credit for this. She called it a blue tornado. And I thought it was, my EP was telling me about this, and I thought, that's brilliant. Because in spots, it was. In suburban America, this was a wave up and down the ballot. It's not just congressional races. It is local city council. It's state reps. It's all that. But it was in pockets, right? In some parts of the country.
When did she call it a
earlier today. I thought it was a very good. It was a series of blue tornadoes that basically hit suburban America, whether it was in Virginia Beach, Oklahoma City, Seattle, Washington, Orange County, California, Miami, where I grew. I mean, if there was a suburb in America that had a college-educated electorate over the national average, I think we're down to something like 3 or 4 seats total where Republicans are still holding seats that are above the national average on education. So I thought that was because it's somewhat realignment. It's not a full wave. I struggle calling this a Democratic wave when they lose Ohio governor, lose Iowa governor, don't win Indiana, don't win Missouri. Previous waves that I've covered included, where you have Democrats winning in Republican territory or the Republicans winning in Democratic territory. In this case, it wasn't fully that. And that's the other reason why this wasn't a full-fledged wave, is the other unique description of most political waves is one party's up and the other party's demoralized. In this case, the Republicans weren't demoralized. They got out too, but the blue tornadoes in the suburbs helped create, I think, at least on the House side, the feel of a wave that I think is more durable, which is why I think it's a realignment.
I mean, not only were they not demoralized in a sense, but their leader, who I believe to be Donald Trump, declared victory.
He did. I think he's...
How inconsistent with reality is that?
He was going to declare victory under any circumstance.
Right.
I mean, it's his great gift. No, it's a gift. I mean, he will, it's a 2-dimensional facade, and he'll swear it's a 3-dimensional building, So, and he'll sell it to you that way. But you got to give him credit. He got his people out. He did something that Obama couldn't do in 2 midterms. He got his people out.
Do you think, and people have talked about this back and forth, and I don't know if your view changed from the time of the hearing to the election to now, some days later, when you've had a chance to look at the returns and the exit polls, the Kavanaugh hearing, politically, and obviously people care about it because it's the court and it's life tenure.
Yes.
But we're going to talk politics for a few minutes at least. As a political matter, that horrifying train wreck of a hearing, the second hearing, helped whom?
By the way, I thought the first hearing was also, I know it didn't have the loud, but it was a poor excuse for a set of questions. But we can.
I agree.
I'm sorry. I mean, and it was very frustrating. I just, as somebody who does ask questions for a living, to see how unprepared United States senators are to ask basic questions and follow-ups is very frustrating. It is, you come out of it.
As someone who also asks questions for a living, I agree.
Yeah, you come out of your skin about it. You get so. Claire McCaskill will tell you point blank the only reason she lost is Brett Kavanaugh. I don't know if that's true. Right. I have a theory that what Kavanaugh did was accelerate Republican interest in the election 2 weeks earlier than it already would have been. I do think, look, the caravan, what Kavanaugh did the caravan continued, right? In as far as Trump's use of it as a rallying cry. I have no doubt. What Kavanaugh did do was unite the party in a way that they hadn't been united in a long time, right? And you have Lindsey Graham, you had rank and file Republicans upset at how Kavanaugh was treated, and so that did sort of unify official Washington Republican Party a little bit. But I'm not of the. I believe that the same quote enthusiasm that I don't think Kavanaugh had the impact, because I think these voters were coming out anyway. But I just think it's sped up there. They popped in the polls sooner than it would have popped.
Right.
It would have been 2 weeks later.
Although, so let me ask you one counterfactual question.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like Republicans were sort of demoralized going into the midterms, and then the Kavanaugh thing happened. Do you think that the world would be different in connection with the blue wave or the blue tornadoes or tsunamis, whatever weather
Pick your bad weather metaphor.
Yeah, we're talking about. If Kavanaugh had been defeated or was forced to withdraw,
mm-hmm.
my sort of non-political expertise thought is that would have turned out Republicans and conservatives in much higher numbers out of
mm-hmm.
anger, and would have depressed progressives and Democrats a little bit because they a little bit got what they wanted. Is that stupid?
So here's the thing. It's a very logical thought, because if you actually go back to 2016, an empty court. I've always believed if you just changed one fact in 2016, if you went back in the DeLorean, and you kept and Antonin Scalia lived, and he was alive on Election Day 2016.
Yeah.
Trump doesn't win. I believe it's the only thing that mattered,
because the courts matter so much.
Courts mattered so much. It was an easy way to get your hold your nose Republican voter,
right,
for Trump. And I do think that was a single. So I start with that. I start with that premise to say this. So I understand why you believe that. I didn't talk to a single Republican strategist who every Republican that was in the field said if they gave up on Kavanaugh over this, it would have demoralized the Trump base, because you didn't fight. What Trump has conditioned his base to embrace is the fight. If the fights with the press, or the fights with the Democrats, or the fights with France, or the fights with the Mexicans, it's the fight. And you will even have some Trump supporters who will say, yeah, look, I know it's, but I love that you're miserable. I know it's not good for me, but I love that you're unhappy.
Right.
And I'm like, what?
It's funny because his slogan is winning, right? It's winning. It's actually not. It's about fighting.
It's about fighting. And I think that, so that's why I actually do buy the idea that Kavanaugh actually would have demoralized. Had they made, and let's be realistic, Kavanaugh was hours from withdrawing. Not days, hours.
At lunch, do you believe that to be true?
Yes.
Do you know that from people?
There was talk. There was some people.
There was talk. That sounds like.
There were some people trying to get
people say.
You should. I know, right? In the Trump era, you can get away with anything. I've been told. People say. These statements they're not factually untrue.
I got to use that one.
Right? Yeah. But there was preparation, and there was people saying, you got to figure out how to get out of this. It was sort of like, how are you going to get out of this?
Yeah.
And then, and Trump was ready to give up on him because he thought, the guy doesn't fight, right? He hated the Fox interview, and he thought he just rolled over when he did the Fox interview. So Trump was ready to pull the plug on him because he thought, the guy, why should I fight harder than he fights?
Right. Look, Trump.
And that message got to Kavanaugh, which is why Kavanaugh did what he did.
No, I think that's right. Look, Trump brought a lot of lawsuits before he became president, and he didn't win them.
That didn't matter.
It's about the fight. It's about making the point that if you cross me, I will sue you, I will mock you, I will ridicule you.
He doesn't care.
I will humiliate you, and I've still won.
He doesn't care. He doesn't care if CNN wins the lawsuit against him. That's the point. He got him to sue. He already won. He already won because he got him. He was trying
Why are
to.
you clapping for
no,
that?
Yeah, but
Stop. Quit the bar.
But my point is that I think that this is the asymmetrical warfare of Trump sometimes, that we don't. Everything for him is buying time. That's what, in some ways too, and that's what the lawsuits do. He knows they're frivolous, but that's one more day that you have to deal with a frivolous lawsuit, and he's bought time.
Right, but in some ways, so the criticism, I think, generally of people and politicians, and in my view, specifically of Trump.
A criticism generally of people.
Of
I like
people.
this. Of all people.
Yeah, of all people. I mean, not these people.
Right.
Because
The unpayers, the people listening right now,
The ones-
you subscribers who didn't buy a ticket.
Yeah, screw them.
Yes.
But these people, my
But not
special,
the advertisers.
my special. Oh, we love Showtime.
Yeah.
Homeland, Billions, it's awesome. No, but the general problem, ourselves included, we don't think in the long term, right?
Yeah.
You don't plan. Everyone wants immediate gratification, which is not normally the key to success. But the weird thing is, based on what you're saying and how Trump has been successful, that the ordinary criticism of a human being like Donald Trump is he only cares about today. And because he only cares about today, he makes decisions that are bad in the medium term and in the long term. So he makes bad personnel decisions. He makes statements that he's going to have to regret later.
Take the
but
Fed.
It works.
Take
for
the
him.
Fed.
Right.
Like, that's a whole, he's mad at the Fed for raising rates because the Fed is worried about the long-term economic health of the country. And he's thinking, no, I need stimulus now. I need easy money now.
Right.
I want the stock market to go up now while I'm president.
Right. So but the question is he then turning sort of leadership psychology on its head by showing you can be successful by saying screw the long term, only think about the immediate term, and that's, there's a response to that, which is it's good for no one but him, perhaps. But is there something to be said for how he's changing the way that other politicians, viewing his success, that's the danger to me, I think.
Right.
Viewing his success, say, well, then I should be like him. What's the danger of that?
Well, that's my great fear, is that he's changing what is how to succeed in politics, right? So just take the idea of, I spent my whole adult life analyzing politics and presidential candidates from the prism of who can win the middle, and who's gonna be the most appealing to the middle, whatever the middle is defined in any election, but there's always a middle. And now you realize, no, the middle of the road, this is about animating your base and forcing the middle to pick a side. So he has gone down that road, and now you are watching copycat candidates who feel as if, I watched Martha McSally decided, there's some candidates who decide, okay, I've got to appeal to this Trump base, so I'm going to curse. Right? Like that, Lindsey Graham's been doing that. Right, he'll say he has dropped the S-bomb on TV. He said "F you" on my air. So there is an interest. I do think Trump is changing at least the tone on how people talk to each other in politics.
But it doesn't always fit those other people.
I agree. Like when Marco Rubio tried it, it
Yeah.
didn't go so well. Frankly, and it was unbecoming on Joe Biden. Remember when Joe Biden said, "I'll take him out and knock him out," and on one hand you're like. It just, that's not who you are, right? That's not who we thought politics was. So he's brought this pugilism to politics, and there is a group of candidates that are trying to copycat him. Look, the guy in North Dakota, Kevin Cramer's the new senator from there, he was suddenly, he went through a personality change. He's instead of being a Midwestern congressman who, he just started using some of the Trump language and sort of the aggressive, politically incorrect takes. So there is this, so he is changing at least the culture, I think, in his own party on that. I think that is the concern of a bunch of us. What if Democrats say, well, if you can't beat them, join them? Look, I had somebody really close to me who's been active in politics for a long time on the Democratic side, who said to me, if you have to sort of wink lie now in order to succeed in politics, that you have to use his tactic, hey, just tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah.
They don't that's not the politics I want to be involved in. Like that's not how I want. And I think that is, Trump has a very cynical view of how politics works. And he practices a very cynical, transactional view of how he thinks all politics is the machine politics of the 50s. and 60s. How New York was a corrupt place in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
He thinks the same, by the way,
And he thinks it's
everything.
exactly that, right, everything's that
About
way.
law enforcement. You know, you name it, he thinks that. You know, I was going to ask this later in the interview, but I'm going to improvise.
All right.
Because I'm not as professional an interviewer as you are. But this idea that his view of what a team is and what loyalty is interesting, right? He doesn't view institutions for what they are and what they're supposed to offer, whether it's the media or a court or a U.S. attorney or the Justice Department or the FBI. And I feel like I think you wrote once somewhere about an exchange you had with him that made it clear that he sort of thought you were on his team because he used to work at NBC and they made a lot of money for NBC, and he's like, look, I helped pay your salary for a long time, Chuck, so how dare you say anything about me?
So
Correct?
in 2000, you know, it's funny, Savannah Guthrie and I had a cable show together for a while when we were in the White House. And during the 2010 and 2011 flirtations that he made thinking about running for president, he'd call us a lot after our show and say, how come you don't take my candidacy seriously? How come you don't believe? And and we'd have these, and we'd put him on mute, and we'd sit there and go, we'd be on the phone with him 30 minutes, and we'd look at each other. Doesn't he have other stuff to do? Like, why is he?
I had that feeling too.
At the time, we're a couple of 9 a.m. cable hosts. No offense to anybody at 9 a.m. on cable, but we're sitting there going, you know, at the time, neither one of us are Matt or Meredith, neither one of us are Brokaw or Williams or whatever. Like, what does he care so much about, about this? So that's when he would start in on the, why are you, I work for NBC, and he immediately would drop the Zucker name at the time because Jeff was in charge, or now it's Steve Burke, he does that, anytime we'd have an interaction. He would go there, but he would say, I don't understand. We both work for NBC. So that is, but you know where this all comes from? I feel like I've discovered that. He learned this, his skepticism of the rule of law. When you realize who his teacher was, then you know why he's skeptical of the rule of law. And you know who his teacher was? It was Roy Cohn.
Yeah, but why did he choose that teacher?
Roy Marcus Cohn is the single most, other than his father, Roy Cohn is the single most influential teacher in the life of Donald Trump.
But he chose that teacher.
I would say he's actually the man who, if you were to put it in modern terms, the guy who created the Donald Trump algorithm is Roy Cohn. And Roy Cohn believed everything was, look at his own experience in the Rosenberg trial.
Yeah.
All right, he saw the government rig evidence because they couldn't use specific evidence because it was going to show the Soviets how they were spying, how they were discovering how the Rosenbergs were doing this. So he and the judge in the process, so he tells Trump these stories about how this is the way the justice system worked in the 50s and in the 60s, and then Trump just says, oh, it works that way all the time. And of course, Cohn, after representing him and successfully sort of keeping the government off of Trump's back for 10 years, that's Trump's whole experience of how the rule of law works in the government and how a Justice Department works in government is through the teachings of Roy Cohn. So of course he's going to think it's all corrupt.
Right, but you don't mean to suggest that that was a passive thing. He sought, he chose to seek out people like Roy Cohn and later people like Roger Stone and Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen. He doesn't seek out the goody two-shoes, does he?
No. They all seem to find each other. It is interesting. The story of Trump and Cohn, they meet at, it wasn't the 21 Club, it was another club in one of those restaurant clubs that were popular in the early 70s. And he's complaining and he meets Cohn. And he wanted to meet Cohn. He wanted to meet him, and he tells Cohn about his case, and he says, my dad and I have these Wall Street lawyers, they're just telling us to settle. Just hurry up and get out of this. You don't want to. And Cohn gave him the magic words, never settle. And from then on, Trump's never settled. It is interesting. He to understand him truly is you have to understand Roy Cohn.
Yes. Let's talk about the press. And its role and your role in it. So you do this show, Meet the Press,
I'm usually sleepy-eyed when I do it.
All right. I'm going to jump ahead again. Let's talk about that. Then we'll get to meet the press. What is it like to be insulted on Twitter and otherwise repeatedly by the President of the United States of America? By the way, you got off kind of light. Sleepy eyes is not so bad. He called you an SOB once.
The SOB was a tough one.
Okay.
And it was because it was my daughter who told me about it first. And she's 14, right? It popped up on social media.
So how do you deal with that?
I was pissed. I'll just be honest. Like, you're just...
That's the best you're going to do? Pissed? This is... We can bleep you.
Yeah. I don't know how else to describe it. Look, I was beyond... That was one. It was hard. It was like, you know, this is a company town, so it's not like, you know, you don't shelter your kids from everything. But you know, I've got a teenager now and somebody who's a tweener.
Me too.
Right, which just means a lot of Fortnite. That's what you discover, right? Yeah.
Or Rubik's Cube in my kids'
Good for you. Yeah, we got rid of the Rubik's Cube about a year ago. That did get, when my son figured out, I can take it apart and put it back together. That's a more interesting idea. So that was, the funniest response I got was actually from my mother, who said, you know, he kind of owes me an apology. and I was like, you know, what more could I say? You're right, Mom. You know, it's funny. It's like, the answer is, it rolls off the back. Like when you get attacked, it rolls off the back. That's what we're all taught to do, whether you're in public service or I'm in the press. You let the criticism, you roll off your back, never let them see you sweat, all of those things. But what he has done, it doesn't bother me. He views the press, I've always said that he views this all as the way wrestling works, okay? And he is a creature of wrestling. First WrestleManias were at Trump hotels. I mean this, I think it's actually a very important understanding of who he is and his appeal. But I think I am curious, how many wrestling fans are in the Preet audience here? Okay, all right.
Oh, no
do you remember,
way.
I know, he doesn't. Do you remember Mean Gene Okerlund? Okay, so yeah, I got the over here about this. We got a real wrestling fan down
My
there.
brother and I used to watch Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Hey, man, I was a Dusty Rhodes guy and Blackjack Mulligan, baby.
Bob Backlund.
Bob Backlund,
Remember him? Yeah.
When I was growing up...
We're going to edit this out of the feed.
I know. It was back when, like, Florida had its own wrestling circuit, all this stuff. And so he views the press as sort of Mean Gene Okerlund, as sort of, he sees it as more of a game, and he'll even say, I'm good for your ratings, aren't I? Isn't this good for you? It's all fun and games until the death threats come. And that's, so I would say the last 6 to 8 months is when you realize the name calling that he's been doing, while it felt light and fun for a while, the pounding of it has had an impact on his crazies. Not hit all of it, and then this is what's, look, 95% of his bases are no more normal Americans than the rest of us. But there is this,
They disagree with your percentage.
I understand.
These guys.
I think we're in
all the WWF.
We're in the
WWE
tornado.
People
I think we're in
out
one of
here.
the tornado alleys. So one of our blue tornado alleys. But there is this demon that he unleashed of angry loners who have used whatever it is. Maybe white nationalism makes them feel like they belong. Yeah. Maybe some other anti-Semitism makes them feel like they belong. And that is what now a bunch of us are dealing with. And that's, the pipe bomb was just sort of the most out symbolic way that a lot of people saw it. And I think that's where you realize, and this is the conversation, and a bunch of us have had this conversation with him. Like, we know you don't mean it as badly as others take it. I've said this, I know he wants it to be banter. But this has had an impact on people, and they have taken matters into their own hands.
Yeah, of
Your
course.
words matter, and he just will not accept that reality.
Because he clearly has never spent any time raising any of his children. Because you know that, right? What? Because you know you have to be careful about what you say around non-fully formed humans because they're children. And there happen to be adults, like you say, who are on the fringe or who have a lot of issues or violence issues, who are not fully formed in a sense. And you have to guard yourself because of the things that they will take from what you say, even though you don't mean them, which is why you talk differently around children sometimes, so make sure they don't do bad things.
That's why you talk differently sometimes in international settings, because you don't know if somebody's going to take what you say the wrong way and start World War III. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't just apply to this, it applies to actually when you're on the world stage.
So let's talk about your reaction. So this happens to you, your daughter tells you, he's cussing at you and you're just doing your job, and your policy has been, which is not everyone's policy, not to respond in kind. Like, are you like the Gandhi of
the
press?
I did it my own way. I think I did a lighthearted subtweet or retweet that just said, I look forward to being wide awake on Sunday, at 9 a.m. See you at 9 a.m. or Sunday or something like that. And then I did have a Trump administration guest on, and it was interesting. They were very concerned. They knew what had happened. I mean, it was sort of it was funny. It was like this one got a lot more traction because he called me an SOB. It wasn't the sleepy eyes. It was that he went it went harsher. And I was like, my God, what has he done? And I'm not a day-to-day reporter covering him the way, so it made it even more weird. Like, why is he, coming extra? So the administration guest, you guys can figure out who it was on, but I don't want to make it easy for everybody. Their person was like, just went to my producer, just so you know, the secretary really respects Chuck. Like just nervous about how I was going to ask him the questions. And so what I decided to do was ask him about comments the president made the night before in the same speech, but not about me, but about what he said about Maxine Waters. And I made it about her. And I say, why does he call her low IQ? And I just decided, it's like, look, I don't normally, you sort of pick and choose how often do you decide to make a Trump administration official have to respond to something the president said at a rally. And we have this debate a lot in our newsroom. How often do you feel like, should they have to answer for his, and I decided, well, Maxine Waters is on the Financial Services Committee. I found a committee that was connected to the person. I thought that's at least relevant to how that person has to do their job, and when they're in front of that committee. So I chose to aggressively question this person on other stuff he said and just kept me out of it.
But you were thinking about yourself still.
Of course I was. I'm not, no, I fully admit, I was angry, and actually that day, I have some of my staffs here.
Did you break
something? They're here to see you, not me. Here. Where are you guys? You got the good seats. I expected Preet to put us back there, right?
And I put some of them back there.
Yeah, the euchre seats. No. I can't use euchre. Well, this crowd might know a euchre.
No, they're the wrestling people.
Yeah, wrestling people, right. And I was in one of those, but I.
Do you turn into the Hulk?
No, I just was like.
Did you see that?
I know.
That's like the beginning of the Hulk.
But it is sort of like when I'm, and it's the only time that I was like visibly, and I was both nervous and upset and figuring out, all right, I don't want to lose my cool, but I really want to make him feel uncomfortable. I did. I was like, that one went too far, and I want them to feel the pain. Sadly, this person's never been on again.
But doesn't that put you in an odd spot?
It does.
In the following sense, though, that you try to be objective, you try to be neutral, you call them like you see them, and you take a lot, which we'll talk about in a second, you take a lot of pains not to give away whether you're a Democrat or Republican, who you vote for and everything else. When the president calls you an SOB, and then let's say maybe a couple of days later you say something critical of a policy or a practice or a statement, he sort of bought himself the ability to say, well, he's just mad.
Yeah.
He doesn't like me because I tweaked him on Twitter. How do you deal with his forcing you to look like perhaps you're not objective because he's maligned you?
This is the trap that he set for all of us. And I always say, I know the trap.
Yeah.
I know he set the trap, which is, you remember, was the Steve Bannon line very early, the media is the opposition party? you know, and that's what, so you're in this position. If you don't respond, then his false accusations go unanswered. And if you do respond, then you're acting as if you're the opposition, right? So it is a trap.
It's checkmate.
And so, well, this is where I just feel as if, and I would say it was about a year ago, and my staff can tell you this, where I sort of got this philosophy, and it was somebody else's advice, and I can't remember where I read it, but I thought, you know what, that's the right answer. Just say what you see, period. And I just view this, my job is this. I'm gonna say what I see, I'm gonna say what I see, what he's doing, why he's doing it, give context, why is he attacking the press, why is he, and explain he's setting a trap here, he's making it, he's attacking us in the press so that if we criticize, explain it to viewers, be fully transparent. So say what you see. And also, I don't care if people don't like me. As much as that, you know, on one hand you're saying, oh, you're human beings, of course you do. But as journalist Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press, if it's not a popularity contest, right? We have to realize as journalists, you know, if your real goal in life is to call them like you see them, then you're probably going to piss people off a lot.
Yeah.
So embrace it. I've done little things to sort of realize that that's the case. Okay, I've retreated a bit from social media. I still do it, but I'm not as, you know, social media is just
Toxic.
Yeah, I mean,
it can
is,
be, right?
you know, look, the Facebook is, as my brother-in-law calls it, he's a high school principal in outside of Pensacola. And he goes, Facebook's the devil. And imagine, by the way, imagine me in a high school. His biggest problems are not kids. The Facebook problem is teachers and parents. Like that's the problem like he was dealing with. So he hates it in so many levels. And I think Facebook is boy, after you read that story in the Times, I mean, that feels like a brand that's never going to recover. And this is look, this is their problem.
Yeah.
People are cheering their downfall. Sheryl Sandberg, call your office.
There goes Facebook as a sponsor.
Yeah, I know. But you know why they're laughing?
We got Showtime.
Right. How many people drop Facebook for Instagram? Do we tell them the bad news? Do you know who owns Instagram? Anyway.
Can you watch wrestling on Facebook?
Yeah. So look, I don't socialize in official Washington the way I think we used to. Look, I think one of the fairest criticisms of the press in general, and I think what made it easy to bash us, is that we did give the appearance of being a little too chummy with the powerful. And I think one of the ways to make the 2016 election, I think, is consequential for our future in ways that we haven't thought about is, number one, embrace the fact that, hey, is there anybody been better for civic engagement than Donald Trump in the last 30 years? I mean, the turnout's been unbelievable. The voter turnout was unbelievable.
But that's a little bit like saying, has there anyone that's been better for doctors recently than
cancer?
Disease?
Yeah, exactly, I know. Where would the CDC be without disease?
Boy.
You know? But I can tell you this, I think a lot of people have decided to look at their place in all of this and say, okay, what have I done? What do I think I've done well, and what can I do better? How do and so in that sense, I feel like at the end of the day, let's inward look a little bit as the press, and everybody else can do their own inward looking, and those are the conclusions I came to, which is stop worrying about what people think of you. You know, in a polarized environment, you know, if you really think you're going to be an umpire and a successful referee in this business, then, you know, just say what you see.
So let's talk about a particular case of someone who has angered people, including the president. Someone who had your job, who has the job you used to have for CNN, where I'm a contributor. Jim Acosta, whose title is what? Senior White House?
I don't know if he's senior or chief. I don't know what the
CNN
naming constructions are, but I think it's...
And he had his press credentials withdrawn. And so my question to you is a multi-part question, Todd, Chuck. Someone recently just kept calling you Todd on the show.
Happens.
How irritating is that?
It's funny, my grandfather, whose first name was Merle, went by Todd. Now, if my first name was Merle, I'd have been going by Todd too. He's been deceased a while. I can make, but by the way, he didn't like going by Merle, so I think it's it. But both my father and grandfather, when you have two first names as a name, it was, my dad was always called Todd by his friends. People, hey, Bharara.
Not a lot of people named Bharara.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen. So Jim Acosta, it makes me ask this question. So CNN has filed a lawsuit over the revocation of the White House press credential on the part of Jim Acosta. And lots of other news organizations, including Fox News and others.
NBC as well. We've
NBC
all filed
as well, right?
amicus
A
briefs.
whole bunch of news organizations who are otherwise competitive with CNN have said they're going to file, amicus briefs, friends of the court briefs, which is interesting to me and makes me think of, the sort of political parallel, which you don't see a lot of, but that I enjoy seeing, and I like to talk about these issues on the podcast, where Democrats and Republicans, they fight, they have different views about politics, tax policy and everything else, but you're seeing a group of people, whether it's Max Boot, sometimes Jeff Flake, Steve Schmidt, and others who say, you know what, there are things, we compete and we have different ideological views, but there's some things that are more important than party and ideology, like decency, like free press, like independence of law enforcement, et cetera. And I wonder, you can clap for that. And I wonder if there's a little bit of that.
But it's just depressing that you have to
People have
to clap for like fair law enforcement. You're like, used to be a given anyway.
It's like
sorry.
truth.
Yes, right on. Yeah.
Truth is truth.
Yes. Truth isn't truth, Preet. Sorry.
But so yeah, we're gonna get to that too.
Yeah.
So you guys compete. People on your network, people on the network of CNN, they criticize each other on Fox. They fight against each other. They belittle each other. And on this thing with Jim Acosta, they're in agreement. Some things are more important than ratings and competition. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, it would have been hypocritical if Fox hadn't signed on, and I'll tell you why. Because I was in the Obama administration I remember one time when they did a pooled event and tried to keep Fox out of it at Treasury. And basically, the rest of us said, it's a pooled event. There are 5 members of the pool, television pool. If, in this case, this is how it works. It's one for all for one. So basically, we refused to do the interviews with the Treasury people unless Fox also could do it. So there's history here. So it would have been, in some ways, it would have been hypocritical had they not. And that is why I think every news organization looks at this. Whether you can, as you said, you can disagree with how they've handled certain things or how they choose to go about their business as a network, whether it's Fox, whether it's CNN, whether it's MSNBC, ABC, CBS, right? But the fact of the matter is, if they can do it to him, they can do it to you. And if this administration does it to that network, a new administration could do it to that network. And that, as you said, we're sitting here frustrated that Donald Trump never thinks long term. To Fox's credit, and frankly, I think every news organization's credit, they're thinking long term. Trump probably will only serve 4, maybe 5 terms. So at some point, now I always joke, I'm like, we're going to wake up in 2032. How did he get a 4th term? But, that's long term, meaning, these are some principles, and frankly, it's worth defining. I'm very curious to see what this guy's going to do, the judge, because there is a technical way he may try to split this decision, where the government can have control over the hard pass, but can't control who a news organization sends in. So,
but don't you think what will happen?
That's my whole personal speculation as to the delay. Is what this judge is trying to find a way to throw bone at the White House.
But to me, it's interesting, and I haven't studied it closely, and I should be careful about how I comment on it since I
was just going to say, I thought, boy, if Preet asked me about this.
I'm a contributor.
I only play a lawyer on TV. You are a lawyer on TV.
If Donald Trump could figure out a way to save face and just make it go away in a way that looks magnanimous, but also like he's winning, you kind of don't want this to come to its conclusion.
Oh, I agree.
Right?
Oh,
You don't want it to come to a
the
conclusion.
lawsuit is the win. This goes back to what I said earlier. It doesn't matter if we technically win as the press in this case. And his people love the fact, man, you really took it to them. You had to make them go to court to come cover you. Good for you. Rather than you want to say to this person, wait a minute, okay, you like this president. What if Fox were prevented from covering Obama? How would you have felt about this? Like, that's the conversation I want to have with the rank and file Trump voter, which is you're cheering this. You do understand if President Elizabeth Warren kicks Fox out, you know, that was an interesting reaction. I always say, all right, let me try another one. If President Steve Bullock, anything? I'm just trying different ones. If President Andrew Gillum, all right, I got more. Wow, how about that? See, you're better off losing than winning sometimes.
Apparently.
Beto O'Rourke, you know. I knew. That was an easy one.
Gary Hart.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. They don't know who he is.
That's the logical conversation you want to have. But again, it goes back to, you know, if Trump's fighting with the press, then his people aren't reading about the Mueller probe.
Yeah.
If Trump's fighting with the press, his people aren't reading about the fact that we are in a trade war with China and China may not blink. If, you know, I mean, the point is that these are, I feel like these fights, he does them, it's just distractions. And we know it, but yet we have to fight it on principle. Like, this is the frustrating part.
It's a huge critique of the press, and there's a bunch of them. And I'm falling very behind on my outline. And we only have 2 or 3 hours left.
Critiques of the press could be a much thicker notebook than that.
Oh, no, I've got a lot here,
okay.
buddy.
I know.
So one is that, on the one hand, people say, well, the president kept talking about the caravan, which was BS, and they were thousands of miles away, and you know, he massed troops on the border. But there's not an unreasonable critique that not just after the election the president stopped talking about it, but the press did too. What is the obligation of the press to sometimes not say what comes out of the president's mouth? And I think there's a reasonable argument that it's...
Preet, you are getting, again...
I will note, the most sustained applause of the evening.
Yeah. No. And as my staff could vouch for me, we have this debate every day.
And who wins?
The tweets. Here's the thing, the president, here's where I fall back on. Who am I to decide when to take the president seriously or not?
Yeah.
And I say this because one of the great examples was, remember when Trump said, well, you know, Obama's the founder of ISIS.
Right.
And we said, well, Hugh Hewitt, by the way, had him on his radio show as a candidate. And Hugh Hewitt says, well, you don't mean the actual founder, right? You were speaking proverbially, right? You know, and I think, thankfully for Trump, Hugh didn't say proverbially. I'm just saying he didn't. I don't know why you're laughing. And he said, no, I mean it that way. I mean, he did it. Him, you know, it was, so here was a moment where we in the press said, well, he's not a serious accusation. And Trump said, no, I mean it. So I go back to, when are we supposed to, is it up to me to crawl in his head to know it's a facetious line? For instance, the whole Colin Kaepernick controversy. You know why that became an issue for Trump? Because he was at a rally in Alabama that was going south, campaigning for Luther Strange at the time, who was a dead man walking in the Republican primary. And Trump's greatest gift as a candidate is he knows how to read a room. I promise you, if he were in this room, he'd find a way to entertain you guys. He just would. He
But it's
has
raining.
this ability. It is raining. He might not get here.
So he's not here.
The safest place from Trump is in a rainstorm.
It's like, if we could just have, for a brief period of time, extreme weather all across the United States, maybe he would go somewhere.
Only if it freezes over. So, now I lost my train of thought. I'll admit that one. We're trying too many punchlines.
I know.
Yeah, this is what happens. We're trying to make each other laugh.
Yeah, and Chuck Todd is like, I don't care what people think of me. You're trying to get them to laugh.
Oh, stop.
But can I ask this question?
Yeah.
It's really the case that there is a certain level of equality in the world. Even if you're a governor or a senator, and there's no one above the law, we say, and this is a terrible conclusion that I've come to. And as a prosecutor, for example, people have attacked the prosecutor. I got attacked all the time. And some people had a bigger megaphone than other people. And they'd say, well, you're going after me because I'm a Republican, or because I'm from this ethnic background, or because I'm Russian, or whatever. And it's difficult, and they have some platform, but they're not the president.
Yeah.
There's something, the president is different
I agree.
from every other human being, not just in America, but in the world. And the president's megaphone is just a different order, right? And so it's another example of checkmate, it seems to me. So you have an obligation as an officer, I'll say, of the press, because the leader of the free world, such as it is, says X or Y. And so that principle that you recite seems perfectly appropriate and just and right and righteous. And it also seems okay to say about some lesser mortal, you know what? We're not going to talk about that guy, Alex Jones, or whoever else, who is spouting filth. The conundrum is that it's the president, and we elected him, and how do you deal with it? And we've never seen anything like it. And it seems to me that the models that we've created over time that are sort of storied, and that we laud, and that we revere in some ways, are not up to the task of it. So what do you do?
Look, the history of Trump is that he eventually wears out an audience and he finds a new one. Now the problem now is he's found his biggest audience he's ever had, right? Where if you look at his days at the USFL, if you look at his days in Atlantic City, if you look at his days as a real estate developer in Manhattan, if you look at his days as an apprentice, in each case they had lifespans, right? Big openings, disastrous closings, right? The USFL, Atlantic City, The Apprentice eventually gets canceled, right? All of those things. So the history of him is that he eventually sort of punches himself out, to use an old boxing term, where you punch yourself to the point where it no longer has an impact. This is the largest audience he's ever had. So, like I said, it may take his fourth term before the country totally is worn out on his shtick. I do think we need to do a better, like I said, we need to do a better job of putting all of it in context. So if he's doing it, explain why he's doing it. There's a why behind it. So today, for instance, he went off on the Mueller probe. It was sort of a greatest
multiple
hits.
times.
Yeah, but what was interesting about it is it was nothing new. It was literally, as I said on my show at 5 o'clock today, he took 18 months of Mueller criticisms and compacted them into 24 hours.
Right.
It was the greatest hits, like even Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and you're like, I hadn't even heard those names since August, Right. Oh, Mueller's quiet period is over. Oh, never mind, we've all been on pins and needles checking the courthouse every day this week, knowing that what indictment is coming, and you're like, oh my God, look, the president said, one thing about President Trump, I'd love to play poker with him, because I think he's a terrible poker player. That dude's got some tells
That's
are
true.
I mean, and this one felt like a tell. So today we took all his tweets, and it's sort of, we say, look at he clearly is nervous, something is coming, right? And we know he's been in the middle of answering the written portion of the Mueller interview, so he's angry. So in that case, I think that's how I've chosen to deal with it. I don't know if it's right or wrong. One thing I'll say about covering Trump, I call this so I wasn't at NBC when we covered the Iraq War, but I accept the idea that I'm a member of the National Press Corps, and so I own that too. Okay, I wasn't covering Iraq, but I say this in that my industry failed the country in Iraq.
Yeah.
Okay, we did. Generally, okay, so, and I think in the moment, and this is a case I go back to, we worry too much about being popular. I think in the Iraq War, we were worried, it had become so wrapped up in patriotism and wrapped up in their national identity that there were too many journalists in the national stage that and the embedding with troops turned out to be a mistake. And there's just all sorts of reasons why that went. I basically say this about the Trump era. I don't know if we're doing it right. We're going to know in 5 years whether we did it right. And I don't want this to be my Iraq war. And I don't want this to be my generation's version of this. And I know if we blow this one, our industry's in deep trouble.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're getting it right with Trump. We're going to know in about 5 or 6 years. We'll know better in 10 years, perhaps. But I do view it that way. It's like, don't worry about being judged today or tomorrow about how you're covering Trump, whether it's fair or not fair. Worry about what this looks like in 10 years. So I do think about that. I think every interview I do with a Trump person, in particular, I'm like, will this age well? I think, because if you think in those terms, I think you'll ask smarter questions and we might get better information out of them.
Congress. So the Democrats have the House. Give me your, you can clap for that. Because I want to get a few more things in before we let everyone go to Ben's Chili Bowl.
What happened? Have you locked them in?
Yes.
You guys are a great audience.
I know.
If you think about it, you've paid for just
They
like two like middle-aged guys. They're like
two guys with a beard and a
beard
goatee.
and and our hair is.
I know.
We're both working on it.
So,
we do what we can.
Is it possible that the president changes his tack with Congress and decides maybe we'll do something on health care, maybe we'll do something on criminal justice reform, maybe we'll do something on infrastructure, and he pivots, or is he incapable of pivoting?
I don't know. I actually thought, I thought the most interesting aspect of a Trump presidency was his lack of ideology. Like, we've always wondered, what would happen if he had a non-ideological president? He has no ideology, right? He doesn't. This is why you have small government conservatives who are feeling as if, oh my God, the ideology's dead, right? There is no small C, Trump doesn't believe in a small government, he believes in strong government, right? It's a different type, and frankly, that is in some ways, the worst thing you could be to a real small government conservative. Logically, that makes sense. For the life of me, I don't understand why the first thing he didn't do was infrastructure. Because that was the easy bipartisan win. The successful presidencies start with something easy to get the big bipartisan win. Obama thought stimulus would be easy. It turned out the Republican Party decided to make it harder for him. But in general, the principle was, spending money, usually everybody's for that.
You mean
George W. Bush did a bipartisan deal on education early on with Ted Kennedy. He was worried about he knew that he got elected in a divisive election, and he was trying to bridge a divide early.
Right. This president started with a travel ban.
Right. No, he went right to divide. But that is something I think that we have to. So the logical thing for him to do would be to pivot, cut some deals with Pelosi, cut some deals on this stuff, because you can ask congressional Republicans that were there in the 90s with Bill Clinton, their frustration that they do all these bipartisan deals and only Bill Clinton got the credit. Yeah. Presidents get all the credit and Congress never gets any of it on those bipartisan deals. So it's actually easy. This should be actually a layup for Trump. Infrastructure, done. But I think he's so determined in his base, they are not as interested in results as they're in the fight. It goes back to the fight.
Yeah.
Everything is about the fight. And I think he believes that the only reason he made that these midterms weren't a total disaster is that he got his people out due to the fight. Look, Paul Ryan is telling him, no, close with the economy. And he's going, which, by the way, Trump was right and Ryan was wrong. Had they closed with the economy, his people wouldn't have come out. Yeah. Closing with the caravan and scaring the living daylights out of people was actually the right turnout call. Terrible for the country as far as like creating literally a mythology.
Yeah, Trump said the economy is kind of boring.
He said it was kind of boring. So I don't think he's going to do these deals. Even though, yes, this should be easy. Literally, it's the Bill Clinton playbook. cut a bunch of deals with Newt Gingrich, then make Newt Gingrich the boogeyman in 1996.
So
that's how Bill Clinton won re-election. He cut a bunch of deals, signed them, and ran against that horrible Newt Gingrich in the presidential race, even though Bob Dole was his opponent. You look at every attack ad in the 96 race, and it was Bob Dole and Newt Gingrich. So the playbook is actually quite easy. If Trump chose to do a conventional political playbook, cut a bunch of deals with Pelosi and make her the boogie woman, and make Pelosi be the running mate for whoever the Democrats nominate, which he may still try to do, but if he is the stumbling block, and look, and here's the irony, Democrats actually need him to work, they have to at least get caught trying to work with Trump. That's the irony.
They have to get caught.
They have to get caught trying. That's what I always say about get caught trying. Doesn't mean you have to do a deal, look like you're trying to do a deal. Democrats have too many people that they won middle of the road voters. They won a slice of voters who may have voted for Trump in 2016, who don't like his temperament, but would like to see some bipartisanship. So I do think Democrats are incentivized more to try to find some common ground with him. Infrastructure is the easiest one to do. Maybe even the pre-existing, doing some tinkers to Obamacare. So Democrats have to do that, I think, for their own political issues. But I don't know if Trump's going to act conventionally on this or not.
Yeah. So to me,
and by the way, he might get a primary challenge, or 2 or 3, which then will, of course, drive him further to the base.
who are the 3?
Oh, I think John Kasich, I think Ben Sasse, I think Jeff Flake. I think they're all interested in doing it, and I thought they'll all get crushed. Because
who's the most viable of those 3? Kasich?
No. You can't run to the left. If you're going to run, Sasse is the only one that seems to have a following in, there's
among conservatives.
Yeah. Conservatives who are appalled by Trump, Sasse is their number 1 person. Are there any conservatives in here, in this room?
Wow. I have no appeal beyond my base.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
I also play to my base.
Yeah. But what I would say is your weekly standard National Review subscriber is somebody that Ben Sasse would appeal to.
Does Jeff Flake have any constituency in the conservative movement?
No, none. Sasse might have a little, but even that, look, Trump has transformed the party. Again, he's redefined what's conservative. Conservative right now is whatever Trump says it is.
Yeah.
What I thought the definition of conservative, and frankly what Paul Ryan thought the definition of conservative was, turned out just that isn't what that base was that interested in.
I'm sorry, who?
Yeah. There was this guy, he was a rising star in Wisconsin, and he actually became Speaker of the House.
Is there a greater non-entity in Republican politics at the moment than Paul Ryan?
You know, I literally feel like I grew up professionally with Paul Ryan. I remember when he got elected to Congress, he was like a staffer at Empower America. I was working at a thing called the Hotline back in the mid-90s. And like Ryan was one of these, you thought, oh, this is a Jack Kemp acolyte. And I don't know where, I don't know, Speaker was the worst role for him.
Yeah.
I think he knew it.
He was reluctant.
What was so interesting about it is it wasn't phony reluctance. He was reluctant because he knew he didn't have the, he would say he didn't have the cynicism to do the job right. I don't think it's cynicism. He just didn't have that sharp edge of an insider Paul that you have to have if you're going to succeed in a job like that.
Yeah. Nor does he seem to have backbone.
Well, that's, by the way, the two go hand in hand.
I mean, you got to have one. You got to have one of them.
You got to have backbone to be a successful leader.
They're going to kick us
Mitch
out.
Mitch McConnell has tremendous backbone.
He does.
You may not like what he stiffens his spine for.
But as Obama once said,
but that dude's got backbone.
You have a drink with Mitch McConnell. Remember that? Let's do a very quick lightning round, and we'll let everybody go.
I will
get
shut
some
up
chili.
here. Yeah.
Ready?
Go.
Start with an easy one.
Yes.
What is the longest running show on television?
Yeah, very nice. I love it. It is, we like to say it's Meet the Press.
Yes.
It's the longest running television show in the world.
In the world?
Nobody's proven to me different. Nobody's yet come up with evidence. Nobody has proven that fact incorrect yet.
There's not like a show in Myanmar that, okay.
Unless Marconi did something that I don't know about.
Would you consider a full beard?
Oh, 1,000%. By the way, Mrs. Todd encourages it. She's put it on her Instagram a couple of times. You can see the full beard. Every winter it comes out. I just always worry I'm going to look like my rabbi. And, you know, it's...
Do I look like your rabbi?
You know what, actually...
A little bit?
A little bit, yeah.
Have you ever played Devil's Triangle? Every time I do that question, it never gets old for me.
I am not a naive guy, and I was a house party guy in the late 80s, early 90s in Miami. I'd never heard of that one.
So your official answer is no.
My official answer is no. I've never heard of that one. That was new to me.
Do you have a favorite Donald Trump lie?
That The Apprentice was #1.
So these questions were collected among sort of people around me. They're not all from me, just FYI, before I ask this next. So, because the next question is, how many tattoos do you have and of what?
Actually, I have none. I have a hole where I used to have an earring. I'll tell you that, because that's what was rebellious in the mid to late 80s.
Like
my
the goatee.
parents said I couldn't get an earring, and I said, well, what happens when I turn 18? I was still in high school when I turned 18, and I said, well, so literally the day I turned 18, that was my rebellious. And you know what? The hole's still there. I for some reason I've
wear it on Sunday mornings.
Someday I will. Here's the thing. I'm not Ed Bradley. That's the coolest dude. Ed Bradley is the only guy in news that could get away with wearing an earring, right? And that was one cool cat. So I can't do it. I'm not going to do that to Ed.
Will you settle down?
Okay.
Will young people vote in the same numbers in 2020?
Oh yes. I think we're going to have Here's the thing. We have never had. This was our first 100 million voter midterm. We've never had 150 million general election. I think the highest about 138 million. I think we're easily going to hit 150 million total voters. Probably higher. Like I said, civic engagement. Now, I will quote something Andrew Sullivan wrote. You know you're free when you're free to not care about politics. You know you're truly free when you're free to not care about politics. And he said, more people feel like they have to care about politics, so maybe we've lost a little bit of our freedom.
A little bit of freedom, yeah. When it rains, do you still go to work?
Yes. Yes.
If you could have any, because you've talked about the revolving door, and you've been critical of it, journalism, politics, government. If you could have any job in government, what would it be?
Oh, wow.
There's a need for an AG.
No. I know that. I guess I would say it would be mayor of Pensacola. I say that because that's where my wife's from. We enjoy now going there. We visit there. We like. It's quiet. I think the best elected job in America is mayor. It's just mayor of any city or town, because you truly can be a public servant. It's one of the few jobs that and every day you have your own poll to find out how you're doing.
Right.
Because people let you know how you're doing. It would be the only elected job I would feel compelled to attempt and feel as if it wouldn't be violating my revolving door issue, for what it's worth.
Should the troops come home from the border?
I'm trying to figure out the full legality of this. I've always wondered, that's something, nobody challenged the legality of whether U.S. troops should be allowed to be sent to the border.
But as a matter of discretion and wisdom and judgment, should they come home?
Well, yes, but,
okay.
I wish this had been litigated.
Can Beto O'Rourke run in 2020 and win the presidency?
No. Well, there's one other person that pulled it off, so, him and Abe Lincoln, so why not, right? Abe Lincoln lost a Senate race and won a presidency, so if you think that Ted Cruz is Douglas and Beto O'Rourke is Lincoln, then, and Ted Cruz fashions himself as a Lincoln-Douglas-like debater. Look, I was a big skeptic of Beto. just, I can do it my way. I'm smarter than everybody else. Well, he almost was. He did a lot better. I always say one of the biggest problems in my business has been there, done that disease. So you got to be careful of it.
Yeah.
And, just because what used to happen in Texas yesterday doesn't mean it's what happens in Texas tomorrow. But look, I joked about the Beto thing, right? And you heard these cheers. Phoenix, Arizona, I'd see more Beto O'Rourke shirts than Kirsten Sinema. Tampa, Florida, Beto O'Rourke t-shirts. He tapped into something. I think that, I wouldn't rule it out.
In
I think
2006,
I think he should. I think it's real.
In 2006, people laughed at Obama. People forget that now, but they did. They laughed at the prospect that he would run.
They weren't laughing, but people thought, oh, it's too soon. That's what a lot of smart, and here's the lesson of Obama. Frankly, it's the lesson of everybody that never ran in 1992 who all said, no, we'll let that hick from Arkansas run.
Yeah. Or Chris Christie in 2012.
And in 1996, we'll run for the open presidency, which is every nomination's worth having, and when it's your time, it's your time.
Yeah.
Don't wait your turn. Take your turn.
Yeah. When can I have a Sunday show? That's not a real question.
Come on in, man.
All right.
The water's warm.
I'm going to end on a note in a moment. Chuck Todd, you were very generous with your time. We had so much to talk about. We went a little bit over. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Everyone tune in every Sunday.
That's right, Sunday.
And then every day at 5 p.m.
Yes, sir.
Round of applause for Chuck Todd.
Yeah.
So just very brief. So I always end the show talking about something in the news. And if you've been listening to the show for any period of time, you know that I spent a lot of time talking about Bill Browder and the Magnitsky Act and his fight on behalf of his lawyer, who was his Russian lawyer, who bravely challenged the corrupt Putin regime, and his thanks was being brutally killed on the floor of a prison in Russia. You may not realize this, but tomorrow is the 9th anniversary of Sergei Magnitsky's murder at the hands of Russian government officials, which is terrible and sad and tragic. But the good news is that through the good works of Bill Browder and others, his namesake legislation continues to be passed around the globe, thanks to Browder's tirelessness, with the goal of punishing those oligarchs in Russia and others who violate human rights. And the other thing that has happened recently is the eerie and horrifying echo of Sergei Magnitsky's murder in the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, which I've talked about a lot on the show too. And so it's heartening, despite these tragedies and in the shadow of these tragedies, that the Magnitsky Act is being used in some ways to remedy or to respond to the death of Khashoggi as well. And so just in the last couple of days, the Magnitsky Act has been used by the US to sanction the 17 people who allegedly participated in a corrupt, violent scheme to murder that Washington Post journalist. So putting aside the fact that we don't know everything there is to know, we want to get to the bottom of it with respect to leadership in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. But the good news is that hope comes in the form of journalists like Khashoggi and others looking for truth. It comes in the form of activists like Bill Browder fighting for accountability. It comes in the form of public officials who try to ensure that bad actors do not go unpunished. So there's a lot of bad stuff that happens in the world, and we have to deal with that, and we have to address it, and we have to acknowledge it, and we have to mourn it. But at the same time, when those things happen, we have to applaud and be inspired by the good people who try to make something better come out of it. So I hope you all take that message to heart. I hope you all continue to vote. Thanks for coming out. Thanks, folks.